Well, hello everybody. It's lovely to be here with you. I think I should have given you a different little bio actually. So I'm a child of missionary parents, spent my childhood in Papua New Guinea, came back, my dad's a minister, and I've been part of the church my whole life, but I am fueled by wanting to participate in the mission of God to bring about the reconciliation of the whole of the world, to build the kingdom of God. So that's my heart, that's my values, that's my childhood background. I currently attend a Baptist church, but I've been thinking about my relationship with the Churches of Christ because I've actually worked with NCLS Research for over 30 years. Went in as a child, really. So being director for, yes, I hadn't realised it was quite so long, but over 30 years, I have been your friend. You may not know me, but I have been cheering you on for over 30 years as I have worked with NCLS Research. And I've been thinking about the pathways where I've come down here and spent time with Churches of Christ Vic-Tas over the years, and what a joy that has been as I've watched you sometimes from afar, watched the changes, the flows of seasons. And it's so wonderful to be here in person with you again. I appreciate that you've brought me, I live in Sydney, but brought me down. And I was thinking about Churches of Christ as well. I work across 20 different denominations, 20 plus. But thinking about your tribe, your crew, and I realised that when I started at NCLS Research 30 years ago, and we did our first National Church Life Survey, and some of you may have even been in churches that did that first National Church Life Survey. We thought it was a one-off project 30 years ago, but here we are still. Some of you weren't even born, I get that. But it's been a long journey of actually trying to understand what is happening in churches with the goal of saying God is on a mission, the community's changing, we need to understand our mission context changing in our own backyard, and we need to think about how we engage with our communities doing what it is that churches are supposed to do. So my journey has been to track and understand what thriving church looks like. And so it's great even now to be sharing exactly on that topic again with you today. I went, right, I'm in my sweet spot today with you. When I started though, we were going to a Church of Christ. My husband was a professional musician, so he was itinerant, working late at nights, working over the weekend. So it was hard for us to actually connect with a local church. But it was a Churches of Christ pastor who picked us up and said, you don't have to be there on Sundays. Why don't you come to my home group? And we joined his home group, and it was during the week, so we were able to attend. And at that home group, we met a group of people that was intergenerational, people very different from us. We were young, at the beginning of our married life, and probably thought we knew it all, But I remember one of the very first Bible studies, we were travelling all over Australia and working in secular locations and really being challenged to go, how are we Christ in these very challenging non-church settings? So that was where we were coming from to do our Bible studies. And I remember one of the first Bible studies where we sat in this room and thought, oh, here we go, how's this going to go? And, the standard notes came out and a question was asked and someone gave the right answer, the answer you're supposed to give. And this old fella sitting next to us went, well, that's bull dust. And we went, oh, hello, this is going to be a bit different. Keith was someone who had married his childhood sweetheart, that they had both felt that God had given them to each other. They were the one for each other. They'd had 2 children, both who had cystic fibrosis because of the mix of their genetic makeups. And those 2 children died early. He then lost his wife early. He was a widower and he did not want those pat answers, the easy answers. It was a profound time in that home group. So that Church of Christ was a wonderful place for us in that time and season. And I was reflecting with my husband this morning as he drove me to the airport at 5 a.m. Thank you, buddy. So do you reckon that was a healthy church? And he went, yes, it was. And I went, I agree. Now, they didn't get everything right. They were committed to mission, and as good Churches of Christ do, we had this great mission event, and we had communion, and everybody had dutifully invited friends and family, but then all the church people sat up the back and left the front, And of course, the new people, because we were always looking for how does this feel to the outsider, the newcomer, that attention, because when you think missionally, you're always thinking to the edges, right? So the core people had all sat in the best spots up the back and left the front. The new people who'd been invited arrived late because they didn't have a car park to get into, did they? They didn't find their way in. They were embarrassed. They had to sit up the front. Gets to communion. After a lovely explanation, the new people still had no idea what was going on and what to do. So when the wafer comes around, we're going, eat it now, eat it. Right? We're trying to show. Poor fella. Then the cup comes around. He's going, oh, and he's looking around going, I've blown it. I've got this thing in my hand. I don't know what to do. There's a thing. I've missed it. I've stuffed it. I don't know what's going on. And this poor fellow up the front, we watched him shove the body of Christ into his shoe in order to take right? So they didn't get everything right, and yet I would say they were a healthy church. So as I tell some of these stories today, I'm going to tell you from my research over 30 years what is a healthy church and share some of the key things we have found from healthy churches. But remember, you don't get everything right. Far from it. And that's okay. When we think about what a healthy church is, I'll give you some definition first and then dive deeper. There are two ways to measure what a healthy church is. I'm talking as a researcher now. There is the quantity way, where you think, can I count things and are they signs of health? Then there's the qualities. Let me talk you through the first way. The quantity way is where you count people. It's simple, because you just go, for example, is this church bigger or smaller than it used to be? I'm going to count heads, and we've got a measure of health, and people can get their head around it really easily. Okay? That is legitimate, because when you go make disciples, you want to see more people, don't you, in a healthy church? However, when we measure health in terms of quantities, we do measure, is the church growing? Are you attracting people from outside the church, newcomers? Are you holding on to your young people? These are numbers we can count and actually go, these are signs of health. The second way is qualities. This is more complex. It can be understood in a whole range of different ways. There are many qualities that a healthy church has, and often it's a matter of listening to stakeholders, and they say, I think it's a healthy church from my guts or from things I've observed, my experience, because theologically I understand health in a certain way. So there are qualities as well for health. It's a systemic approach. In a literature review I did of all these studies of church health across the world, there were all these things came up, right? All these words, but there are some words that kept coming up over and over again. And when I synthesised it down, some of those words there on the screen are the kinds of words that people in studies went, these are signs of healthy churches. And if I hadn't shown you that slide and just got you to brainstorm, you would have come up with similar things. When we study church health and we try and define church health, you can go, a church is healthy if I see there are small groups. A church is healthy if it's growing in numbers. A church is healthy if people say that they are deepening in their discipleship journey. They're becoming more mature disciples of Jesus. So there's all these different ways of measuring. If you do research, you're always thinking, is this the input or the outcome? Are you doing this thing to get an outcome, basically? So if we're trying to measure it, some of the things that sometimes get measured are the things that you're putting into the mix because you want a certain outcome. When we think about health, we're thinking about the so that. Why do you educate? Is education the goal? Well, no, you educate so that people know more about Jesus and their faith deepens. The goal is mature disciples. The input, if you like, is educating. So we always ask, when we think about the things at the end, we're looking at the so that question. We do this, a healthy church looks like this, so that people grow in their faith. so that people participate in God's mission. So we're always going, think of it, it's a system if you like, and we're trying to go, because you're here, if you've invited me here to go, what do we do to make a healthy church? It's like, well, what do you put into the mix so that what? So that, and we have to remember it's not about so that we have a great kids program. Well, no, it's not about having a kids program. A healthy church is not the kids program. You have the kids program so that. So that's just thinking about when you're trying to go, oh, well, what are my signs of health? Are they inputs or are they the outcomes? So when we think about a healthy church, these are the signs that we look for. Firstly, we go, is this a church that is sustainable? So we look at, if you have to go, you can't just say, well, we're lovely, we love each other, it doesn't matter, don't talk about numbers, because if you don't talk about numbers and the numbers are going down, you actually won't exist. So you have to actually ask questions. We ask, are you growing numerically? Or are you at least stable numerically? Number 2, are you attracting people who were not part of a church who are joining you? Do you have young adults in your church? Number 1, do you have young adults? And I have to say there are a lot of congregations in Australia that have no youth and no young adults. That's where we're at in terms of an ageing church. And the problem there is young people cluster together. So once you get down to very few or 0, it's very difficult. So we're going, are there young adults in the church? And even looking at, are you retaining your own young adults as well? And we did a study recently with young adults where we found that basically if you're thinking, do my own kids even connect with church? Are they still part of church life anywhere? The number is 4 in 10 children of churchgoers are still connected to church. Okay? We're not retaining all of our young adults or all of our kids. Healthy churches also help people in their relationships. So they are sustainable. They help people in their relationships. 3 sets. 1 is my relationship with God. Does this church help me in my relationship with God? That's the key relationship. We're not a club. We're actually a church. Secondly, does this church help me in my relationship with other people? So do we help people belong, to connect with each other? The third set of relationships, again, reminds us that a church that is a nice club that may even worship God together, if they do not have a focus beyond themselves, they have lost the plot of what it is to be church. Church is people in participating in God's mission. So does this church help me have a relationship outside? Through word, through deed. Do I speak about faith? Do I act with advocacy, with service? So am I focused on relationships beyond the internal relationships? Then there's this third set of things. So a healthy church is a place that we've discovered in all of our studies where there is a culture, which is sort of that secret herbs and spices thing. There's a culture where the people say, we are capable to act. There is a capacity for action. They're focused forward. They have a vision for the future. They're open to trying new things. And they have leadership which is empowering and inspiring. So this is what we look for when we're trying to measure. So you can see quantities and qualities is what we're looking for. And some of you who've done our church life surveys, you can do one now if you like. We can help you out with that. We'll know our 9 core qualities where we go, okay, let's actually break down those qualities. And there are qualities about the internal life, which is about the growth in faith, the belonging, where the worship is inspiring and nurturing, doesn't matter what style it is. Then there are qualities which are about reaching out beyond, whether you speak about faith, whether you invite people. And then there are those, what we call our catalysts, those key ones that tap into that culture stuff I was talking about, which is there a clear vision for the future? Do people think they're open to new initiatives? and how do they view the leadership. The power of the Church Life Survey is you ask everybody, the visitor, the first-timer, the new people, and the long-termers. So it's a real health check. We have a simple health check that's available for churches, for you guys if you want to use that this year, but the full Church Life Survey, which again you can use, allows everybody to have a voice. So we're doing this based not just on the view of one person, but actually going, a healthy church is when the newcomer says, yeah, I feel like I belong here and I'm growing in my faith. They're part of the story. So this is really strong research. Now, what have we learnt about flourishing churches? I have this great cartoon, which is a broomstick in the pulpit. You know the saying you could put a broomstick in the pulpit there? It's sort of true in some places. There are some places where it's easier to plant churches and to be church because the context is easier, right? So we're going, what can you learn about what's associated with flourishing? Is it all about what the church does? Because there are multiple things that impact on whether your church is going to be healthy. And I don't know if you know, what's that, The Incredibles? Where basically the superheroes, it's all about him, and his wife says, it's not all about you, because it isn't. Whether or not you're healthy is not all about your church. What is going on is, number one, national factors or international factors. Let's call patterns of global secularization. So when you're sitting there going, my church isn't healthy, well, you're dealing with global secularization, right? You're dealing with worldview changes and individualism. I'm not going to do that talk, but there are huge things that are, impacting the globe, let alone world wars or whatever it is, major things going on. Nationally, what's impacted you nationally? Well, at the moment, we've had things such as, well, let's put COVID in the global factors issue that's impacted on your health. Other things that have impacted on you, let's say a royal commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. That has impacted on your health, right? A same-sex marriage plebiscite has impacted on your health because what has happened is Australians have said, you know what, I don't trust you, and when you tell me I'm doing wrong, I am not interested because who are you to tell me? So we have a problem of trust in this nation with those factors. Whether or not, whatever you think about those issues doesn't matter. There is a trust issue that impacts on the health of your local church. Local community factors. I don't know why my church has declined. Oh, there is a freeway that now cuts through my town, but it's my fault, I think. I should have done better. There are local community factors. Different communities, some are easier. That broomstick is easier to put in the pulpit in some places and people still come. Right? There are Bible belts, right? And they are there, and so where you're planting, it makes a difference, or where you're trying to be church, it makes a difference what your local community's like. Quite local. You may have a local history, etc. Then there's denominational factors. So what's going on with the churches of Christ? What are the features of the churches of Christ that are impacting on your local church? There are things that we know that denomination does make a difference, right? We know that some faith traditions are more likely to have growing churches and flourishing churches than others. So it makes a difference. And now we come to the local congregation. So is what you do, does it make a difference? Well, all of the things, the first three things, are outside the control of the local church, aren't they? There's nothing, unless you change movements, there's nothing you can do about those things. They're givens. So the work that we've done over 30 years is, can a local church do anything that makes a difference about their health? Good news. I'm still in a job so far, and you're all still in business because we have found over and over again that yes, those big global national things matter. Yes, your local community matters. If you're in a community where there's a lot of new people arriving, it's a growing population, you're more likely to do better. Okay? If it's that's the kind of community that does better. If you're in certain denominations with certain faith traditions, you sort of got a bit of a head start. But the internal life of your local church makes a difference when we control all those other things and go, is there anything left to explain whether this church is healthy or not? The great answer is yes, there is. Your church can make a difference. And these core qualities in your church life play a key role over and above all those other factors. So, what I've got you to the point here is, what is a healthy church? There are lots of ways to think about it. Can you even do anything about health? Yes, you can. That's part one. Part two. Having discovered this in our research over and over again, we went, okay, now we know that there are healthy churches. We know how to measure them. We know how to find them. What are they doing to actually invest and strengthen their health and vitality? Let's learn from the best. Let's learn from best practice in Australia, not America, not anywhere else. Let's learn from Australian churches about what they are doing in healthy, flourishing churches. So we did this project called Enliven Churches. And we said, right, we know that healthy churches are growing in numbers, they're growing in spiritual health, and they're growing in vitality in all those different ways. And so our question was, what are they doing to remain healthy, to become and remain healthy? So these are insights in what we learned from this project. We used the National Church Life Survey, and we had results from 3,000 churches across every faith tradition, every context, small, big, rural, urban, the whole lot. And then we looked for those measures of health, and we kept it, we put it into categories. So we said we want some Catholics, we want some mainstream Protestants, we want some evangelical Protestants, we want some Pentecostal. So we wanted to make sure that we had some examples from everybody. So we made these 4 categories, and we went, we're going to go hunt down who is at the top of the pile. That measures of health that I described earlier that we were talking about, we looked for churches where they were not only sustainable in terms of their numbers, they had young people, we were pretty kind on the growth one, they weren't declining by more than 10%. That was our line. So you had to be just not declining too much. So we're a bit generous there. We looked at the signs of relationships, the connections with God, with each other, with the community. Did they have those in place? And did they have those catalyst, inspirational qualities where there was a culture where we're going, we can do this? Not only did we then find the churches, we contacted the leaders, and we contacted the leadership teams and said, hey, guess what? You've come up on our health check. And you know what the most common answer was? No, that's not right. That's not us. You must have that wrong. Clue number 1, there was an incredible humility about these leaders and these churches. All right? And we went, no, you actually, when we put these health measures in, you came up. You came up in the list. And so we went and visited them, and we walked around their buildings, and we looked at signs, we looked at how things were set up, we interviewed the leader, the key leader, and then we interviewed a leadership team as well. And we asked them a set of questions to go, basically, what are you doing? How are you getting these results? I'm going to walk you through 12 characteristics that we found, okay? Grouping them into 4 sets. The first set I'm going to speak about is the culture piece. Faith-filled and collaborative. That was the big thing that we're going to put as the culture, and I'll speak more about that in a moment. Then we grouped the other things in terms of the actions or approaches that those churches actually took. And you can see they were intentional and aligned, they were inclusive and empowering, and they were learning communities. So let me walk you through each of these. Under each of those 4 groups, we have 3 characteristics sitting under each one. Now, I'm reading off my notes up there on the back screen, and if I get it wrong, I'll turn this way to see if I can, because I haven't got my glasses on. Let's go with the first set. So let me walk you through this faith-filled and collaborative set. This is to say here it's the culture, because it's like it, no matter where you look and no matter how diverse these churches are, and they were across faith traditions, they were small, they were big, they were rural, they were urban, they were very diverse, but this is what was in common beyond what looked very different on the surface. So the culture piece is, it didn't matter what was going on, we could see this was the kind of church culture that they'd built through all of their activities and their approaches and their values and things like that. So we found that flourishing churches nurtured faith foundations. Now, I think every church would hope that they are doing this kind of thing, right? But in these churches, they spoke, it was like the first thing they said. It was the presenting thing. They spoke about, let me give you an example. One church said, when as new leaders we walked to the front door, and before they even gave us the keys to the building, the elders that were with us said, let's stop and pray. And they said, these were the kind of elders we wanted. These were the kind of spiritual leaders in this church who we're standing on the shoulders of, that their first instinct was to pray. People who spoke about how intentional they were with their Bible studies, the work of studying and being nurtured by the word. People in these churches put first their experience of the Lord's Supper, of communion, Eucharist, whatever their language was. They put that first, and they said, when we gather around that, when we gather around the bread, and we see that God is in the bread, when we gather and we remember that we are church and we are part of the body. And they found that, that whole sacramental layer, the rhythm of it and the coming back to it was a core part of their sort of faith-filled faith foundations. So it's like it's a given, you sort of go, it's a bit like you've got to give this answer first when you're talking about a healthy church, but it was so evident, this living faith in the leaders, in the people, and the ways that they put that first. Collective identity, right? This is an interesting one that we found, which is, I'm going to call it the yes, we can factor. Listen in your own church to the language. In a healthy church, what we hear is we language, not I language. We hear, we do this, the way we do things around here. Our DNA is like this, right? That's what I'm trying to get to with this collective. And I know that in every church there are individuals who are so faithful, that have a strong prayer life, that are studying the word, their devotional life is strong, their practice is strong, and yet you go, well, why is the church not flourishing? It's not about the personal faith. You can't question that. A flourishing church has something that is the in-between. It's the space between you all, the connections. Something happens in the we. And when you create a we that says, we can do this, we are about this, this is who we are, that is a powerful identity. And then people go, I belong to this and I know who we are. So the kind of activities there. So I would encourage you, look at your own church. In some of the sample churches we talked about, it was you could see it when you walked into the building. You could see it in the art that they'd made together, the representation of their values that they owned, the way that everybody you talked to was able to say the same things, right? They used the same language. They actually knew who we are, and they knew what was important to us. So that collective identity is a piece that you go, what would you say in your church? Are you hearing, look for the we, would be a clue. Collaborative leadership. We've put this in the culture set because we could have just put it into sort of this is an approach, but it's more than that. It's a culture that says, and I'll tell you, we talked to some churches that were very hierarchical, and there was a very clear man at the top, in some we talked to. Let's just say that's that was the model, right? And then there was very flat structures as well. But across all the different models, we heard this same relational leadership that was collaborative. It was an unafraid leadership. It was a leadership style that said, even whether they went, look, this is, I am the senior leader, whatever it is, they were not afraid to listen. People were not afraid to contribute their ideas. They felt able to be heard. They felt able to shape what was going on. And there was, it just had a flavour about it. And I read one story of a church where the leader was talking about the youth, in fact. And this is a good example, because it was like, what we're saying to the youth is, well, they're going to take over from us one day, and they need to get ready. And so we help the youth have their own worship team. They do their own practices because they do their own style. And the leader said, a lot of my time is spent sort of intervening and explaining and excusing and covering for and all the rest of it. But he wasn't afraid to protect this particular group in his church, to be empowered, to have a go, to learn, and to go, I'm going to do this because one day I'm going to be leading this church. I'm going to be a part of this. I'm going to be up there in the worship band. I'm 11 now, but I'm going to be in the worship band. All right. Well, away you go. So it was an unafraid, unthreatened, if you like, style of collaborative leadership as well, where it was like, we will always be open to learning from each other, but, to actually allow leadership to come. And it was even in the hierarchical structures to go, yeah, all right, give me your best ideas. Let's talk them through. So now we talk about approaches that we saw in these churches. So that's the style, the culture that they had. In terms of the approaches, what we saw that flourishing churches did was they discerned and communicated a clear and owned vision for the future. Now, they did this in all sorts of ways, but we watched and saw examples of vision days or whole pathways where people were all given journals and journaled out their dreams and visions for the church over a period of time. There were gatherings, there were camps, there was the big statements on the wall that you can see there. There were 100 different ways to do it, but they had done the envisioning work of going, right, where are we going? And how do we make sure we're all on board with it? So have a think about your local church. When did you last do that intentional work of envisioning for the future? Envisioning for the next few years and a longer horizon again. So, and there's a lot of great material out there to help you envision. But that was one thing that all these churches did, was to actually say, let's do the work together of going, well, where are we going? Where are we aiming at? Another key feature was that this is the intentional and aligned, right? There was an intentionality about it. And I think coming out of COVID and we're sort of settling down, trying to work out what's next, this is a good reminder that healthy churches are intentional and they align their activities. So it's not just, it's a time, I think, for you to be going, are you thinking about what you're doing now, what you're seeding into, what's coming next? And a common feature across all of these churches, again, no matter what size they were, was they were actually thoughtful, intentional, and strategic. So they thought about how they were going to do the different parts of what a good church would do. They discussed it, they planned it, and some of them were highly sophisticated around it, but they had strategic ways. So they thought about, like there's a church that, I don't know if you can see, there's a bucket there with some vests in it, the welcome team bucket, right? That is for the people in the car park who have the welcome signs that help you find when you come in, how do you find your way? First, the website. Does the website tell you what time your service is on? Where it is? What to expect when you get there? Is it outsider focused, newcomer focused? Does it tell you what to wear? What happens with your kids when you get there? Are you thinking about that first timer, right? That's doorway number one, because newcomers check your website first. And they check the local churches. They do not travel. Newcomers with no church background do not go hunting. People from other churches go hunting, right? Newcomers are going to just look locally, and so any one of you have got the same chance at having a newcomer come through the door. And they'll check your website first, and they'll wait, and it will be better if someone invites them, and invites them once, twice, 3 times. Relational connection is what works there. But so you get to the car park. Can you find your way in? Yes, there's someone who helps you. Welcome. This is the way to get to the front door, okay? When I walked in here, I looked a bit dopey, and I stood there, and a lovely lady took me by the shoulders and went, "That's the toilet over there." And I went, "Oh, thank you." She knew what I was looking for. Long drive, but she was aware of me coming in, and she helped me as soon as I got in to find my place here. Welcome cards. Do you have a way that if someone's sitting in your church pew, that you actually enable them to make that first introductory connection? Simple stuff, but do you have it? Do you have a way that they can leave a way of connecting with them? Do you have the people that help find the place for them? You can see the Connect 4, someone's got a whole program there, and there's one very sophisticated church plan where they have this whole complex system for, is this person visiting? Are they living this far away? Are they closer in? Are they making a connection? And they've got this whole pathway of how you're going to actually draw people and connect them in to your church. So very strategic, but all of them had this intentionality about how are we doing this? How are we helping the new person arrive? How are we helping them connect with this? How are we going to do this bit? And so they knew they had different strategies, but that was a key part. All these churches were open to innovation, and they innovated, and they weren't afraid of failing, and perhaps they didn't even call it failing. When you're a risk taker, and we are in a time where we have to take risks, we have to try new ways of being church and doing church. And I feel like I've been saying this for decades, but even more so now, like we have to enable and allow and encourage people to try things differently. And when it doesn't work, you go, oh, well, that was a good learning. What are we going to learn from now? What are we going to do now? So this idea of innovating was like, don't be afraid of the risk-taking. You can do it carefully, but the risk-taking of something new, because we have to. It is a time for new wineskins. So flourishing churches not only say, my leaders help us think about new things, but I'm open to something new. And our church invests and resources the new thing. That may be, some of the examples that they gave was, we put a new pulpit in. It was a visual symbol of, we're willing to try something new here. As simple as this visual sign, something's always just being tweaked or changed. It's like, we're not afraid. We're just going to move that. We're going to put the flowers behind rather than on the side. You know what I mean? Like just those little signs I'm talking about, just to go, yeah, we're going to have a go at that. Let's try pausing in the middle of the service and having morning tea in the middle. Because that's the most important bit for some people, is that actually time to connect. So let's do that. That might be a bit dramatic for some of you, but you know what I mean? Like it's this, do the little things that signal that you're willing to actually try things differently. Then that allows you to do the big things. And there was one church that went, we're going to stop the second Sunday service because the leader had determined that it was getting a little bit too closed in. It was lovely. Everybody loved it. It was big, but it was becoming where the families that do things this way, and they'd stopped being permeable at the edges, right? And he went, if we keep going like this, it's looking good now, but it's going to devolve. He took this massive decision in consultation, but to a degree, he took this decision, we're going to stop that service. He managed to take that church on the journey to understand why he was stopping that service and why they were going to start a Saturday service, and enabled a new kickstart. That was a big one, but he took them on that journey and said, because we're on a maintenance mode and we're going to wind down if we keep doing what looks nice now. So that was a big innovation. But he'd set the culture up as we try new things here, and this is what we're going to try now. Come with me. And he was able to take them with him. Now, the next one is focusing beyond. Without a doubt, every one of these churches was thinking intentionally about the people who were not there. And I've talked about that a lot already. in terms of focusing beyond. But there was a love for the community. There was a love and a serving and a connection with the people around them. How does your church not just stay inside the building? And I think one of the patterns I've seen in church life, particularly in the last decade or so, is a turning inward, right? And so our church life survey goes, oh, we love church, we love each other, we're growing in faith. The hard thing to tell you is that in terms of do you invite anybody to be part of your faith community, that has gone down, 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 down. Where we've lost confidence to tell people why we love church, why we're part of it, and we've stopped inviting. Now there's reasons, but we've stopped inviting. So that focus beyond is not only about loving the community and serving the community, but speaking why I do the things I do, why I'm serving in this soup kitchen, why I'm down at doing this activity with you, why I'm helping out at the school canteen, whatever it is, I do it because I love Jesus and this is part of me living out a life of faith in your own language, but that speaking about what you do. Flourishing churches not only love their communities, are in their communities, wanting the best for their communities, but also being there, being witnesses, testifying. That's what we're supposed to be, testifying. Can I tell you about the difference, that my church made for me when I was going through a tough time? They cooked casseroles for me. They looked after my kids. That's testifying. That's witnessing to the work of the body of Christ in your life. So the focus beyond. But there certainly was a love for the community. And also it was, when you come to the front again, how do you get in? What are the signs? So when we walked in, there's a church there that had the kids' playground right out the front. And that immediately said to anybody, kids are welcome here. This is a place to have fun. And the doorway was really wide and open, and it was very easy to find our way in. It was that really walk into your building again. Can you find the front door? How many steps are there, to get in? All of this stuff that is focusing not on the people who are there every week, but the people who are not there every week. Next one, obviously, is be hospitable. Pretty well, every one of this is not quite true, but many of these churches had a coffee cart. Many of these churches, as soon as you walked in, it had the welcome lounge, it had the bar, the coffee bar, the way somewhere to sit, so that again, as soon as you arrived, there was hospitality. There was a multicultural church, for example, with from a community where there was a lot of refugees in the community, and for them, the role of hospitality was critical because people brought food from their own countries, they shared food, and around the table, the good work happened, the relationship happened, the healing happened. We have asked the wider community, what of this list of things, if you were going to come to church, what would you come to? And we gave them a whole list of things. The 2 things that they tell us? Food and music. So if you need a clue, feed them, give them some nice music. They'll come to that. And what do church people say? We're a bit afraid about asking them to this and that, but we can do food. And go, yeah, you can do food. Easy peasy. Hospitality around food works. Being inclusive. What these churches also had was they were inclusive around different forms of diversity. It may be generational diversity or cultural diversity, but there was often an intentionality that says, as the body of Christ, not only is it okay to be different to each other, we have to be different to each other. Because if we're all the same, I don't know, the Bible has something to say about that, doesn't it? If we're all an eye, how do we hear? Empowering. I've spoken about empowering a fair bit, but it's that same thing of the 11-year-old that you say, how are we going to empower that person? How are we going to empower attenders to feel like they can contribute? So even if there's strong top-down leadership, you can still have churches that go, I see your gifts. I know you are gifted. I see your gifts. I see your experience, and we want to harness what it is that you have to give. There are too many people sitting in churches that are going, I would like to get more involved and offer more of what I have. When did you actually not just could you please fill our rosters, who are you? What have you got? What would you like to contribute here? oh my gosh, you are incredibly skilled at this. You have great experience at that in your workplace, and you're happy to share that. That kind of people empowering. Learning, I'll zoom through and then I'm going to pause and give you some time for some questions. So learning, the humility I named earlier on was really key in these leaders, and the whole community was learning. Many of these leaders were doing leadership training and equipping. Linking the learning and the empowering, we did a study on leadership development among emerging leaders just recently, and the paper's just gone up on our website. What we found is in thriving churches, multiple people are empowered, and like when you ask the leaders, have you worked with someone to mentor them, supervise them, equip them, etc.? In the thriving churches, it wasn't just one. Pretty well every pastor said, oh, I do that, and go, thank you very much, yes. But in thriving churches, there were many people. There was more than one, so they were doing it across multiple people, and they didn't just give them a chance to be involved in the worship service. They gave them opportunities in all areas of ministry. They opened up all areas of ministry as part of the learning and equipping for that leadership pipeline. So that's what we've just learned from thriving churches. Last one. That all sounds very exhausting potentially. What these healthy churches taught us is about sustainability. They taught us, the leaders more than others said, I make sure my holidays are in my diary, booked ahead. I know how to set boundaries. They weren't all great at it all the time, but they knew how important it was, and they had practices of sustainability, practices for themselves, because they understood it was the long haul. That's the 12. I'll leave that up. I'll come back to that slide so you've got that to remind you. But I just want to, if you go to the website that we built at the time we did this study, enlivenchurches.ncls.org.au, you will find case studies there, you will find stories, you'll find photos, and you'll find lots and lots of little examples of what these churches actually did. And they may just trigger something. Now, we did this study before COVID, and we contacted them, a number of them afterwards, and said, so how are you going now? And they went, yeah, well, a bit smashed. So part of what they would want to say to you as well is, please don't put us up on a pedestal. We're not as healthy as we were, or it's a different season, but it's a journey. Building vitality is a journey that we have to keep going on. And there was a humility about that learning, that collaboration that they kept talking about. So that's the giving them the last word. That's what they'd want to say to you. One is, oh, surely you don't mean us. And you go, yep, you look really ordinary, and yet you're extraordinary. And you know what? It says that it's possible, okay? And there's so much that can be done, and some of those features are some of the flavours. So let me throw it out to you now. We're going to have a time of questions. There are 2 roving mics, I understand, that are going to go around. And if you would like to make comments, you're welcome, or questions. And I'm going to just give somebody give me a clue when it's time to wind up, all right? Otherwise, we'll get through as many comments or questions as we can. Who would like to get us started with any responses you have, questions you have? Got to process a bit, I know. Pause for a moment. And are you going to be like Keith and go, no, that one was bull? Or does it resonate? Does it intuitively make sense? Like the research has found, and you go, yep, my guts tell me that that's right. I recognise it.
Thanks, Ruth, over here. Probably the question for a small church,
yep,
that is just looking to, we've heard the leadership pipeline word probably, the last few days.
Yep.
And where to begin with it. If you could choose 1 or 2 of these 12
yep,
that we should be looking at just to kick us off, what would they be?
Good question. I'm going to go around the first set because that's the culture piece, because in a sense, the approaches and the activities can look like anything. So it's about the yes, we can culture. What can you do to invest in a collective identity that says, we can do this? And maybe what can we do, a collaborative leadership approach that says, how about together we work on something and let's see if we can get a win here, and then we will celebrate this because we did this. And I think as Westerners, those of us who are from a Western background, and certainly a lot of the world has gone down this individualist world view, and operate out of I, and in fact everything's about me and my constructed identity on social media and all of that, We have to learn, I think, from other cultures who are so much better at thinking collectively. Churches are well on the way with that, but I'd go, what can you build to go, we are something special here and we're going to do something good and we're going to enjoy and celebrate it. And because we worked it out together. Yep.
Have you got the opposite? So they're like, it wouldn't be 12, but like 3 key characteristics of dying churches or threats to flourishing churches?
Yeah. All right, well, if we flip it, we go, dying churches are more likely to be in towns that are dying. So the context matters. You can't do much about it when the bank is closed and the school's closed and you're the only one left there, right? And often the church is the last one left. So that's a local context issue. If your denomination has a massive fight about something and they're splitting and throwing people out left, right and centre, hard for you to not cop, those sort of, now they're factors outside. Inside, again, it's where it's the opposites of these, isn't it? It's someone thinks, it's my way or the highway. I don't care who you are, what gifting God has given you, I don't want to hear about it. Those who are an anxious presence rather than a non-anxious presence, in terms of the way that you lead, not coming back to the core faith principles, not coming back to prayer, Bible, the sacraments as the nurturing stuff that goes, well, this is where we come back to as our true alignment piece, our plumb line, etc. So, yeah.
I have a question about faith foundations. You mentioned sacraments a couple of times. Could you speak a little bit more about that, and have you noticed any increase in including sacraments post-COVID than before COVID?
I can't speak particularly because we haven't done, our National Church Life Survey happened during 21 and 22, so we need to check back in about what's actually happening. I think that's a good example. I mean, it's out of certain traditions that highlight the sacraments, but even so, I think there's maybe what we learnt and are learning again is the importance of rhythm and ritual, and maybe the physicality as well of faith, that the embodiment, when you bring your body into a room and you walk up the front or you get handed something and you taste it, there's an embodied spirituality there that means all our memories and our meaning making is locked into something. And humans, when we do our big things in life, we need ritual, don't we, and rhythm. So there are things you do, when you get married, when you die, food again, we gather. I've had 3 funerals this week that are in my life, and, we gathered. We did the storytelling, we cried, we laughed, we ate, and these sort of rituals that enable us to move through life at these key moments. And so when you have your weekly ritual around the bread and the wine, I think recall the power of the rhythm and ritual of that as a nurturing part of faith. And I think Churches of Christ, it's a gift you have that you centralise that piece in your tradition. So it's a strength. Don't make the most of it, and offer it. What else can you offer in terms of those rituals and rhythms that enable people who may not have? I'll just say one thing about newcomers really quickly. Newcomers, you may think that a newcomer to church has a conversion experience, comes to know Jesus, then joins a faith community, and then starts to practice like a good disciple, becomes a mature disciple. Actually doesn't work like that. What newcomers teach us is, these are people who have no faith background. So it's not believe, belong, behave. It's actually the other way round. You behave, you belong, and then you believe. So a newcomer coming in will come, they will watch you, and they will behave like you. If they want to stay, they'll start behaving in the way that you behave. They will watch when you stand, when you sit, when you eat, what you do. They will behave first. And as they behave and they decide to stay because you're a kind and loving and relating community, they feel they belong. And the more they belong, the more they take on the identity and are able to say, I believe. I see myself as a person of faith, as a Christian. And because I believe, I'm going to start to live in. So if you ask a newcomer about orthodox Christian beliefs, they actually don't agree with a lot of them, right? Sorry about that. Even if they've had a conversion experience, they haven't just bought the package, right? They come into an understanding of beliefs. So I'm flipping, right? Things that you may go, but that's, aren't we supposed to have this conversion experience, bring people to Jesus, and then this other stuff follows? It's about the relationship, and people grow into faith, grow into maturity. And if you put the walls up too high, they will not make it in the first time. I heard someone just the other day in a church plan, I was horrified. It was a woman, she wanted to get involved in the church, and she asked to be part of a home group. I would go, wow, fantastic. That church went, no, because we're not quite sure you're orthodox enough yet, and so you can't join a home group. She went somewhere else. Thankfully, she found a place, but I'm going, what? Why would you not want to enable her with her unorthodox views to be part of you, watch you, learn from you, and grow to be a mature disciple? Don't put the walls up. Yep. Where have we got? Somewhere up the back here? Yep.
I'm just wondering if you noticed a pattern in terms of the ratio of leaders to congregant members in the flourishing churches?
No, it was very diverse, very diverse. But we were able to meet with whole leadership teams who understood themselves as having leaders. The actual governance and structures varied very dramatically, but in the collaborative leadership model, many of them saw themselves as leaders. Yeah.
Hi Ruth. Thank you for the presentation. I noticed that you said that the study was done pre-COVID.
Yep.
I was also a little bit taken aback when you said that you defined growth as anything better than a negative 10% decline. So my question really is, let's say there was churches that are in that category that they're in decline, but they actually tick the boxes of doing things right. Mm-hmm. Have you had any follow-up with them to say they're a turnaround story, or is it just that they're dying slowly?
We have another study which I called the U-turn project, but it's not really a U-turn because that would be you're strong, then you're weak, then you're strong again. We looked for churches that were not strong and became strong, found the same kind of things that were going on, that was able to kick up into strength. In terms of declining, our most recent results, which are COVID impacted, but I'm afraid currently the majority of churches are in decline. The majority of congregations recorded a decline. And only 5 years earlier, from 2011 to 2016, 28% of churches were growing, only 28. From 2016 to 2021, 22, that went down to 18% of churches growing. Then there's a group stable, and there's a very big group declining. Now that's COVID, but it's just a big warning sign for us. That's why we couldn't actually find enough in the growing box.
Yep, I like the idea of envisioning a good and a growing and healthy church has a good vision, a bold vision. Now, our church has a vision statement for the past 15 years, and I'm trying to get our church, all right, to have a new vision, all right, moving forward. But there were a lot of pushback, all right. And the saying is, nothing is broken, all right, why fix it? And so I'm having a lot of problems. Do you have any suggestion how to move forward and how to perhaps get the leadership, all right, to understand the importance of embracing a new, bold vision?
Well, I guess you can say to them, across the country, something is broken, because 100 years ago, 95% of Australians called themselves Christian. Now, less than half. Australians say, I don't belong. Australians say, I don't trust you, the church. Australians say, I'm not sure what I believe. Australians don't even know who Jesus is. So when you say, and I've just told you, the majority of churches are declining. And I've told you that while people in church go, I love church. If you look at some things, I love it. I belong. I love what's going on here. My faith is flourishing. I love the music. Fantastic. But I've told you that inviting people to church has gone down, and newcomers from outside into the church, from no church to being part of the church, has gone down. So I would say, I'm sorry, it is broken. Something is broken. Even if this church feels okay, in Australia, we have to be courageous and think like the early church, think like that call to go make disciples again. You know, remember the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. You know, it is broken. That's a tough place to finish, isn't it? Let's pick one more question, one more good. I don't want to finish with that as my last sentence. Look at the great things you can do to build health. Okay, one more over here.
Just one that relates to the changes since COVID. I've just been out for a moment, but it seems to me that my kids, they do everything through the net. And I've discovered that in my demographic, so there's my kids and then there's my demographic, grandparent, that I'm away from church a number of times because I'm needing to do stuff with the kids, but I can go online and see church. And people will check out your church if you're online, sometimes for a year or two before they actually come through the door. And I think to think that we can get people through the front door when the church has been judged so badly by the press and media in this last decade is faulty thinking. I think we've got to make places of belonging wherever our spheres of influence are. But have you got much comment on using online to bring people into the gambit of faith because they've been able to watch you and see what you do?
I think that is, it's absolutely changed, and the whole world has changed. So I think you all, in the same way that I've been using that in-person experience, you're absolutely right. People are watching online before they walk through your door. They will check you out. And so everything you do is on show to the whole world, you know, and it should be. You should put your stuff up online. We have to embrace that technology. So that's one side. At the same time, I would say the learnings that seem to be coming through more and more is that you cannot create an online community, or there's very few examples where an online community can be a sufficient replacement for an in-person community. So it's an extension we have to add and be aware of, but I don't see, other than those who've done an amazing job at building online church, but are working very hard to do all the things that one might do in a church with, you know, on Discord or whatever, with their online community. But they do pastoral care, they do, all sorts of things. They do study, they try and mimic everything. But I know, for example, in universities, while are now going, well, we're all online, you can do all your lectures online, it's fine. This year, the students are coming back in numbers in person and are frustrated when it's only online, even though they appreciate that they can watch their lecture anytime. And I know this from my own boys, they did it as well. So when I heard the results, I thought, I've seen that in my own family, both my boys will go into the university, sit in an empty lecture hall, to be there physically, to hang around with whoever's there. But this year I've heard a couple of universities go, we've got people turning up in person because we're realising it's irreplaceable. So it's our challenge. We've now got to just do everything and more of. Very difficult. But good reminder, it's not they walk through the door. There's a whole other set of things you've got to be thinking about, outsiders' perspectives. One more thing about newcomers. Newcomers come because someone invited them as well. They will check you out, people will check you out, but newcomers from no church background come because someone invited them, probably to food and music.